Welcome to The Explainer. So, you're just starting out as a Security Operations Center analyst? Well, this is your survival guide for that critical first month. We're going to break down the 3 absolute essentials for success. One tool for getting your hands dirty on systems, a second for hunting through mountains of data, and a framework that gives everything you do real meaning. Let's dive right in. Okay, if you've just started, you know exactly what this feels like, right? It's a tidal wave of alerts, endless logs, and what feels like 100 new pieces of software. It can be completely overwhelming. You're left wondering, where do I even start to make an impact? Well, that's exactly what we're here to do. Give you that focus. All right, first up on our list, PowerShell. Think of this as your fundamental toolkit, your direct, hands-on connection to all the Windows systems you're supposed to be protecting. Before you can even begin to analyze logs from a distance, you absolutely have to have a way to talk to the machines themselves. Picture this. An alert fires on a specific machine. The very first question you're going to ask is, okay, what's actually running on this thing? The get process command is your instant answer. It gives you a full list of every single active application. This is ground zero for any investigation on a machine. So that's the stuff you can see. But what about the things running in the background? The processes you can't see. That's where get service comes into play. This command shows you all the background services that run automatically, often without any user even being logged in, and you know what? That's a favorite hiding spot for attackers, so knowing how to check them is absolutely critical. Let's break this down, because it's a super important distinction. Think of it this way. Get process shows you what the user is actively doing, like opening Chrome or Notepad. Get service, on the other hand, shows you what the system is doing on its own, like running updates. An attacker who wants to stay hidden is much more likely to disguise their malware as a service. That's why you need to know the difference. Okay, investigating one machine is cool and all, but what if you need to check 100 or 1,000? This is where you get your superpower. The invoke command lets you run any other PowerShell command, like the ones we just talked about, on as many machines as you want, all at the same time. This is how you scale your investigation across the entire network. And here is a classic security spell you can cast with PowerShell. This single line of code will instantly pull every single failed login attempt, that's what event ID 4625 means, right out of the local security log. It's a textbook way to look for someone trying to brute force an account. But here's the question. What if you need to search for this across every single machine at once? Well, for that, we need our next tool. And that brings us to Splunk. If PowerShell is your hands-on toolkit for one machine, think of Splunk as your all-seeing eye. It's like a Google for all the machine data and logs your company generates, putting everything into one powerful, searchable place.
Now, how do you talk to Splunk? You use its special language, called the Search Processing Language, or SPL for short. The best way to think about it is like an assembly line. You start with a huge pile of raw data on the left, and then you use that little pipe symbol to send it down the line, from one command to the next, filtering and shaping it at every step.
Now, building a query sounds complicated, but I promise it's really just a simple, logical process. Seriously. First, you just tell Splunk where to look, like in your security data. Then, step 2, you filter that massive pile of data down to just the events you care about, like our failed logins. And finally, step 3, you analyze what's left to find the interesting patterns, like counting up the failures for each user. All right, let's put it all together and see what a real-world threat hunting query looks like. First, we tell it to look in our Windows event logs for that failed login code, 4625. Then, we pipe that into a stats command to count them up, grouping them by the computer they came from and the account name they tried to use. And then, the magic part, we only show the results where the count is greater than 5. And just like that, you found a potential brute force attack. Now, stats is your bread and butter. But there are a few other commands you'll be using all the time. Time chart is fantastic for making graphs to see when things are happening, like a sudden spike in activity. And Rex, well, Rex is your secret weapon for pulling out tiny specific details from really messy, unstructured log entries.
Okay, so we've got the how, right? We have PowerShell for querying systems, and we have Splunk for hunting through logs. But why? Why are we even looking for failed logins in the first place? What does it all mean? That, my friends, is where our third and final piece comes into play, the
the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So what is this thing? Honestly, the best way to think about it is as a giant, incredibly detailed map of how bad guys operate. This isn't just theory. It's a playbook built from observing thousands of real-world attacks. It gives everyone, you, your boss, other teams, a common language to talk about threats.
And this is where it all clicks into place. Remember that Splunk search we just did for failed logins? You weren't just running a random query. You were actively defending against a specific adversary tactic called credential access. When you use PowerShell to look for suspicious remote commands, you're hunting for lateral movement. See, the framework gives your actions purpose. It's the difference between just following a process and being a strategic defender.
So how do we wrap all this up into something you can use every single day? Let's build a simple, repeatable playbook, a mental loop you can run for every single alert that comes your way. Here it is, your core workflow. An alert dings. Step 1, you grab PowerShell. What's happening on that machine right now? Step 2, you pivot to Splunk. What's the history here? What led up to this? And finally, step 3, you reference MITRE ATT&CK. What was the attacker trying to achieve? What's the bigger picture? Query, investigate, contextualize. That's the loop. And that's really it. It all boils down to these 3 things. In your first month, don't try to learn 100 tools. It's just not going to happen. Just focus on these 3. PowerShell for interaction, Splunk for investigation, and MITRE ATT&CK for context. Master these, and you're not just surviving, you're thriving. So you have the toolkit, you have the playbook. You're not just reacting to alerts anymore. You're a strategic threat hunter. You're ready. The only question left is, what are you going to hunt for first?